Thank you for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for May 8th, 2023. Let's see, we have 2 items on our agenda for this evening. And I'm going to pull it up so I get it correct. The first item that we're going to be talking about is our accelerated implementation of the ASAP, the new CAP, the SCAP. And then secondly, we have our Affordable Housing Strategic Plan update. We'll go ahead and get right into it with no other business to take care of. So, Tess, if you want to introduce this, that'd be great.
Amazing. So, good afternoon, Council. My name is Tessa Schreiner. I'm the Sustainability Manager.
And I'm Tim Carves, I'm Sustainability Program Administrator.
So this evening or afternoon, we're going to give an update on options for accelerating the implementation of the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, also known as the ASAP. All right. So the purpose of the work session tonight is to provide information to Council on options to accelerate the ASAP. As a reminder, in October of 2022, Council directed staff to come back with some more information on how we could drive the action items in the ASAP forward or accelerate how we are reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And so we are not asking for any direction today. We are just providing information ahead of Council's goal-setting session in just a few days. And should Council choose to adopt a climate goal or renew a climate goal in the upcoming round of goal setting, we are prepared to support the development of that language and then would work to help support allocation of funding in support of the renewed goal. All right, next slide. So we'll give a brief presentation today on this topic. We'll cover background in previous Council action, give a really high-level background on the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, especially for our 2 newest Council members, and then we'll go into the options to accelerate the work.
So here's some additional background. As outlined in our memo, the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, recommends limiting global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and then states do not exceed threshold of 2 degrees. That's to offset the worst impacts of climate change. Aspen and Pitkin County are not immune to this, as you can see in this graph right here. Pitkin County's average temperature has been increasing over time. And this has a variety of impacts locally and for our community. Consecutive frost-free days are really a historical metric that we use to track climate change in Aspen. And since 1980, due to warmer temps, we've lost the equivalent of around 30 days of winter. This has happened in less than a lifetime, and we'll have to work hard to protect our winters going forward as well. The next slide highlights some of the other climate impacts that we're facing. Higher energy demand due to higher temperatures and more reliance on air conditioning. Changes in snowpack have impacts on recreation and water supply. Water shortages impact agriculture, and then low flow puts additional strain on our hydroelectric resources and ability to procure energy. And then finally, severe wildfire is a constant threat and one that has impacted us locally and viscerally in recent years. And wildfire risks the destruction of infrastructure and homes and transforms landscapes, and smoke ruins air quality, which has strong impacts on local communities ranging from the young and the old, especially the vulnerable. So not to mention the risk of landslides. So we can expect more of all of this if temperature continues to increase. This graph represents Aspen's business as usual projections way out to 2050. As seen in the graph, we're already on a path to reduce emissions, but with current trends and policy, we will not reach our climate goals. So the longer we wait will lead to fewer opportunities for future councils and future generations to act on this climate problem. And getting ahead of business as usual projections will require immediate and aggressive action now. And the market, unfortunately, has not demonstrated ability to do this. So a little context here for just the data displayed on the screen is that every 3 years we perform a greenhouse gas inventory of both our municipal and community-wide emissions. Tessa will talk a bit more about that in the slide to come, but these inventories help us understand key sources of emissions and really help us to prioritize areas to focus our attention on.
Great, thanks, Tim. So a little more background on previous council action, and just to draw your attention to the reference on the right, which is our 2020 greenhouse gas emissions by sector. We'll talk about that and how that relates to our ASAP in a little bit. But historically, Aspen City Council has demonstrated significant leadership in the sustainability and climate space. We are seen as a leader not only in Colorado, but across the nation. And have, especially in the last year, really accomplished a lot in regarding reaching our climate goals. So to begin, just a little bit of recent history. So in 2021, Council set a 2-year carbon goal to reduce our emissions. And in 2021, City Council signed on to the Race to Zero, which commits the city to achieving 100% reduction of emissions by 2050. Council further codified that by adopting science-based targets in 2022, which are Aspen's own responsibility for reducing emissions at the local level. And then so that number is a 63% reduction by 2030, using 2017 as a baseline, and 100% by 2050, which is in alignment with Race to Zero. Finally, in February of this year, Council approved the updated Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, which is the roadmap to achieving our goals, and you can see here the science-based targets. So really high level, again, for especially our new council members, our ASAP, or our Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, at a glance, is our climate roadmap. So it is broken into 5 sectors that correlate directly with our greenhouse gas emissions, so energy supply, buildings, aviation and airport, transportation, and waste. The largest sector of our emissions is the built environment, specifically with 57%, followed by some of these other areas. And so we're not going to go into detail today about the plan itself, but each of these areas has objectives and action items that correlate to it, and again, work towards reaching the overall greenhouse gas reduction goal. So we'll now go into, after the review that we've just done of previous council action and the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, we'll go into the options to accelerate the implementation of the action plan. Again, this is in response to council's direction back in October, and then after we passed the ASAP, we now have the plan in place, so now we're going to talk about how to accelerate its implementation. So we'll begin with process and methodology in this section. So we, in the process of developing this list for council's review, we reviewed specific areas of the ASAP that were really a catalyst for additional emissions or had a snowball effect. So it was not practical at this time to look at the entire ASAP and to develop a list for the whole plan. We just looked at these really high catalytic areas. And so because there are fiscal impacts or implications to this accelerated options list, we felt it necessary to hire a consultant to help us provide council with cost-benefit analysis, again, to demonstrate how we are, what's the most important things to do first to really set us on a track for success. And this consultant that we hired, we ended up getting a list of 9 high-impact projects, which we then boiled down. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Tim is going to talk about the analysis in a second of those projects and how we came to them.
Yeah, so the criteria we used to narrow down these high-impact projects, along with the consultant, were areas where we felt that the city and staff had a broad span of control, where we could utilize existing technology, where the cost-benefit analysis of those projects made sense, and where there was existing alignment with council direction and community support for those project areas. As an outcome of all of this, staff then asked these climate consultants to develop a model that shows the individual and cumulative impacts of each of these high impact project areas. That model itself utilizes numerous assumptions, but most important of which is that the projects will stimulate additional projects or snowball those additional projects that when calculated all together will help secure 100% of our emissions reduction goals. Here, and a quick example of that is a comprehensive audit of all city-owned buildings will require the additional data, the additional research, and staff will be equipped with the understanding and knowledge to then help propel further additional work that will lead to a total reductions of emissions of all city-owned buildings within that time frame. Lastly, several like projects are grouped together in support of the analysis. So here's the model, just a summary that we developed. I'm not going to go into details, but I'm very happy to answer any individual questions you have about this. As you can see from the dotted black line, that's our business as usual projections, and the color block shows the percentage of reduction of each project area from there on. The key takeaways of this model are both highlighted in the red box. One, altogether, the climate work we've identified will result in a 63% reduction in emissions by 2050, which coincidentally is also our 2030 climate goal as well. And number two, 24% of this total is attributed to the 9 high impact areas. This has the effect of removing around 56,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, or 7,000 homes' energy use for 1 year. The biggest wins come from energy efficiency and building performance standards, construction and demolition waste reduction projects. After analyzing this model, staff developed a list of 5 foundational projects that Tessa will discuss in the next slide. These are essential launching off points for setting accelerated action in motion. Staff chose these five items through careful consideration of their tangible value, through sequencing of actions, what data we need to collect now, or what information needs to be collected before we take action, and then we also considered staff capacity and a feasible timeline for delivery of these.
Great. So as Tim mentioned, we took the consultant analysis and really asked ourselves, like, what are the most tangible, immediately implementable and necessary projects that we would need to do to set the foundation for this work, right? What information do we need, and how can we do this really smart and thoughtfully? And so that concluded in these 5 foundational projects. So these, again, set the stage for additional work to be done. And I want to call out that they may not seem maybe very sexy or frontline, and they're not. I think that there are other projects that are more maybe visible. I do, however, want to highlight how important getting this really baseline and foundational information is in order to make really thoughtful progress forward. A lot of this is the city leading by example, sharing information and showing support to a lot of our community members. And again, another reason why these were chosen. And so I'll go into these very briefly at a high level. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you'll see cost estimates on the board. These are just that, they are estimates, and they are a range because it depends on the scope of this work. And we just wanted to show council and give some information of ballpark what these things could cost. So to begin, you'll see there's 2 items here that relate directly to the built environment, the Building Performance Standards Technical Assistance and the Energy Audit of City Buildings. This is in direct reflection with the fact that buildings account for most of our emissions. And so the Building Performance Standards Technical Assistance would include software and consultant assistance to really help property owners. That would be the goal. Help property owners make changes, make sustainable, again, financial and environmental benefits to their buildings. The second note on this list is an energy audit of all city-owned buildings. This is of benefit for 2 really key reasons. The first is that it will give the city as a model and as one setting policy, really good understanding of our own buildings so that we can lead by example and continue to lead by example. In addition, it will also help us provide information to property owners that will, again, hopefully help them make really strategic decisions about their own buildings. Third on this list relates to transportation and fleet. The fleet and facilities analysis was identified in the Fleet Zero Emissions Roadmap, which Council adopted in late last year. This was one of the first action items that was suggested in that roadmap. And what this would do is essentially the city is transitioning to an all-electric fleet over time. We need to have a really good plan of what that looks like, what's available to us, and when to make those strategic decisions about what fleet to transfer and when. And then the facilities analysis really says we're going to have charging needs for those vehicles that we are charging. And so what does that look like? What is the capacity of our current facilities? What do we need to plan for in expanding transformers or energy capacity, and the location of those chargers, et cetera? So that's the third bullet. To really move the needle in the waste sector, working in construction and demolition waste diversion or enhancing that program, along with enhancing or expanding the plastics reduction program, are two areas that we feel are strategically beneficial and would just take staff time for us to really dig into that more to move that needle forward. And then finally, the strategic financial plan for the ASAP is again two-pronged. The first is that we currently do not have a comprehensive understanding of what reaching our 2030 and 2050 goals would look like. And so a financial plan, that would be one part of that, is to say, this is what we can guess of how much this would cost to implement and where those funds should be allocated. And then second, what this would do is it would provide a pretty comprehensive list of how we could finance this plan, right? And so there's a variety of funding sources, federal and state. There's different tax incentives. There's different just innovative financing structures that I think we are not even aware exist, that someone could tell us, here are really intentional and smart ways for us to plan how we implement the ASAP. And again, to be really thoughtful and strategic about it. So that's the summary of these 5 foundational projects. And again, we're not asking for any direction this evening, just here to field questions and provide information ahead of council's goal setting session in just a week or so.
Thank you so much. Let's get to any questions. Sam, you want to start?
Yeah, that's 4. Where does the money come from? What fund pays for?
Is your mic on?
So I was asking where the money comes from to pay for climate initiatives. What tax source or what fund does it come out of?
It's a great question. So the climate work right now has, our climate fund comes from the general fund. We are funded a little bit by utilities as kind of shared interests for resource conservation. The general fund, and then in addition, some funding from the REMP fund comes to fund climate, and then the REMP fund also pays for a lot of our energy efficiency work for the community through CoA.
Great, thank you. Is our code where all new buildings that are built, do they meet our climate goals, or are we building new buildings that are contrary to the climate goals?
Such a good question. So yes, the new enhanced building codes that council adopted in January are some of the most stringent building codes and do work to meet our climate goals. And we are working really hard on identifying where code alignment makes sense. So we're talking about building performance standards for existing buildings. We need those 2 codes to talk to make it as simple and streamlined as possible for building owners and developers.
That's great. Glad we're not building digging a deeper hole on that. And then 2 comments, actually. I was just wondering if each year we could report back on if we're on track. Because I always feel like companies, governments do these climate goals and then maybe adding 2040 to a number that we could see if we're on track for that as well. If we're doing 2030 and 2050, why not 2040?
Totally. No, I think that's great. For the ASAP, we're doing something a bit different this year to that point, which I think you'll like, is we are coming back every year to share an update of how we've done against the objectives and the action plan. And then we'll come every 3 years, at least for now. We do a emissions inventory every 3 years, so we'll be able to measure against our success every 3 years as far as our inventory goes.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. John?
No comments. I thought the presentation was very thorough. Thanks, Tessa. A lot of hard work went into this.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bill?
Thanks, Tessa. Thanks, Tim. A few questions. So furthering Sam's first question, could you help me understand, I don't know if you have this at hand or not, but what is the total annual budget for the Sustainability Office and how many FTEs are dedicated to sustainability efforts in the city budget?
Absolutely. So our total budget is about $650,000 annually, and I'll get the exact number for you. We have, under that budget, we have 3 FTEs. So myself, Tim, and Claire, who is sitting in the crowd right here. So programs administrators, and then 2 support positions, 2 part-time positions. And then part of our work is also is waste, but that is not formally in our climate budget. That's in the environmental health and sustainability budget. And I can get that those exact numbers for you right after this meeting.
And how about CJ?
CJ is environmental health and sustainability, so he's our director. So climate's under
That's
environmental health.
included in that 650,000?
No, environmental health and sustainability is like the broad department, and then climate is under environmental health and sustainability.
Okay, thanks. Building performance standards. I have some experience with the very nascent process that you've implemented with this, with a commercial, a proposed commercial remodel in Aspen. And could you please talk about what you do with this data? I understand the purpose is to gather, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe I understand that the purpose is to gather data of energy consumption on existing buildings in Aspen. What do you then do with it? It's a lot of money. You're saying that it has a huge impact. I don't understand how you can force private landlords to do anything, so I'm missing the part, like, what do we do with this data?
Totally, yeah. So Building IQ has 2 parts. The first part is benchmarking, which you're referring to, which is the tracking and reporting of energy and water usage for specific buildings over time. So city buildings, commercial buildings, and then eventually multifamily buildings. And to answer that question first, what we're doing with that information, we are not releasing that information. That will be summarized in an annual report, but council made a specific decision not to release any specific building data on those buildings. What that helps us do is enhance our programs. So if we can say, for example, man, there's a lot of buildings that are having issues electrifying. Maybe we need to put some of our resources or talk to CoA to help support building owners more in electrification, as an example. So it's on the back end programmatically how we offer better programs to the community. That's really the purpose of that data. It's also used to track, how we're doing over time and how Aspen buildings are performing, and so that we can, again, reach our climate goals in the built environment. And then the second part, which you were referring to, is our building performance standards, and that is a policy and is set, but the guidelines are being developed by a group of stakeholders, including developers on that team. And that is not defined yet, so those stakeholders will work together to define what those actual building performance standards will be over time, who will be included, how aggressive they will be, what resources the city will have to provide, in order to implement it. And so that's still in development. That hasn't been finalized quite yet. And so we would be the 9th community to adopt building performance standards. The state of Colorado has adopted building performance standards, and it's not prescriptive, it's performance-based. So it says, here's your goal for your building type. However, it meets your needs with whether you're, capital improvement, your, O&M for your building to get there. We'll provide resources and support you to do that, but we're not going to tell you what's right for your building, and we'll provide the help for you to get there. Prescriptive would be like, you have to change your LED lights. That may not make sense for a lot of buildings. So anyway, that's in development, and we have representation from the building owner and managing community on that committee to support developing that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, but I have trouble digesting it. I think the part that I have trouble digesting is the resources that you're talking about allocating towards energy efficiency improvements on these buildings are the most expensive parts of buildings. So you're going to have all this great data, and you're going to go, okay, we got to help commercial building owners electrify their buildings, and you're talking about many, 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 many millions of dollars to do so. So there's a reason why building owners don't do it on their own volition. It's because the payback is not there. The ROI is not there. So I'm just skeptical of whether the end game's realistic or not. Mm-hmm. Those are my big ones. Thanks.
Thanks. I got a couple questions for you, and I realize that this is not, this is just leading up, but these are the questions that I have, one in each area, I believe. So the first item, and if you, can you go to the slide that has the,
Absolutely. Oh, goodness. All right, here we go.
thanks so much. So on item number one, building performance standards, tech assistance. To me, I looked at this as something that I knew that we would need moving forward with some of the building IQ stuff that we were intending to do. I am comfortable with allocating more funds to this. A little bit along the lines of kind of what Bill was bringing up is that this is going to be difficult implementation, costly implementation, community worthwhile and beneficial, I think. But so I don't really have questions about this. I just wanted to reiterate that I think this was an assumption that I thought if we were going to go down the building IQ path that we would probably be needing. So I'm comfortable there. The second one, energy audit, this is a large range. I don't understand, is this a large range because of scope or amount of buildings that we get done? In the description, it says all city-owned buildings, so why is there such a large range?
It's a great question. I'll answer, and then Tim, you can add any context to this. But essentially, it's the depth of the audit that we do. So if we do like full retro commissioning or like really in depth, I mean, Bill, I think can speak to this, of like really looking at the innards of a building and the kind of cost analysis, it's more expensive. But Tim might be able to give more context.
Yeah, the consultants that we worked with gave a range of either 10 to 60 cents a square foot for this type of analysis, and that's essentially just based on how comprehensive that audit is.
So that's great. Maybe as we go forward with this, instead of thinking of all city-owned buildings, maybe we start with one to learn about what we want to do and what the depth is that is appropriate there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
Corey, one thought on that in support of what you're saying is, as long-term owners of these buildings, where we are paying for 100% of the energy costs, this is probably, to me, the most sensible thing we could do here, right? It's like, we're gonna own these buildings forever. We're paying all the utility bills. If we can save money, even if it's a 10 or 15 or 20-year payback on some of these upgrades, they're really worth considering because over the long term, they make a lot of sense. So I would suggest, believe it or not, coming from me, the upper end of this range is probably the right direction to go to figure out what the full range of energy upgrades to do.
And that's possible. That's very possible. I don't know. You know, just in the spirit of conversation, along with what Bill just said, you know, for me, a different take on exactly what you said is, you're right, we do own these. We are going to be managing these. So for me, this is not necessarily something that needs to be done immediately city building wide, because it should just be part of our philosophy. If we're talking about things that ultimately are good sense economically, environmentally, et cetera, we should be doing them. And especially if they're our own city buildings. So you're hearing support for it, but your approach on it to get best bang for the buck is kind of what I'm hearing.
Heard. Thank you.
The third item, fleet and facilities analysis. I thought that we had done a pretty good discussion of our fleet recently, so I don't know how much in depth. Again, what we've charted as a course is our desire to see 100% electrification, but we know the hurdles, the challenges, and the obstacles that we face there. So I don't really understand why we just need an analysis along these lines when we know our end goals, and we've set our end goals. On the fourth item, construction, demolition, waste diversion, plastic, talk about the value item on the list. I'm very supportive of this. You know, I'll say it again just for record, but I really believe that the efforts that we put towards our waste construction, demo waste, plastics reduction, all of those waste diversion efforts that we have are just so worth it because it's a fundamental, and that's where people learn about their responsibility in all these other areas. You know, I kind of say, I can't really expect somebody to try to improve a large commercial building or electrify their home even if I can't even get them to really understand that it's important to separate your trash, compost your compostables, drive as little, you know, just have an overall conscientious mentality about your own footprint. So I'm so for any of this. Strategic financial plan for ASAP. Well, at this time, I think I have to, because Ward's not here to represent himself, I think it needs to be said that he still prefers the CAP instead of the ASAP. That was in his email. I just want to share that. And that just might be the name itself. I don't know. Yes, he does love his caps, doesn't he? Yes, he does. His 4-hour cap and his 5-hour cap. I had a question about this earlier, but I had an explanation given to me by Philip for support for the financial plan. Again, this is one of those things where I don't really love spending money on plans in this respect, because I think that these courses are charted for us and that we are going on them. But he assured me that this is actually an exercise that can help get you the results that you want. So I'm willing to listen. I just think that, again, we've set the wheels in motion on a lot of this stuff, and I think we just need to keep on going, and I don't need a whole bunch of study. We're going to be hard-pressed to reach our goals, and the thing we can do best now is keep our foot on the gas. The electric gas. Is that it? Anyway, that's what I got for you. One on each of those points, and that's kind of it. I appreciate the update. I love this work. I think that we're doing really great work. I keep saying it, but, you know, I'm not looking for us to really bite off a whole bunch of new stuff just for us to really get good at what we're doing, because we're doing a lot of great stuff. So
Great. Okay.
thanks. Anybody last comments? Any OOOs?
Yeah, just one more. Excellent. Last comment would be, when it comes to this style of work, we're just one place, we're just Aspen, but it'd be great if we were a leader in this and if we come up with a model that can be used in other communities, because if we're at 0 climate emissions and everyone else is at the same, I'm pretty sure we're still going to see reduced days of our winter anyway. So trying to be a model for a template for other communities would be one of the greatest successes I could see from these programs.
Thanks. John?
I just want to assure Sam that we definitely are. Our new building codes are the best in the state as far as energy consumption. And I do want to add that benchmarking is going to be difficult, but obviously it needs to be done so that we know where improvements can be made in the future. Thanks, Tessa. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Thank you all. Appreciate
I
it.
feel like you've got clear direction on all of it. Awesome.
So this was just really good guidelines and feedback on information and heard on questions, especially regarding building performance standards. And this is good information to go into goal setting, and we'll be back in front of you, I'm sure, not too long from now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, how you doing?
Getting better. You're talking about my knee?
Yeah.
Yeah. I went on a big 50-mile bike ride here today. Yeah.
Oh, so you're recovering. Yeah.
I'm not skiing.
Oh, good. Take it easy with 50 miles. You know, wouldn't want to hurry that process.
I can't walk that far.
You can't walk, but you can ride 50 miles.
It's all downhill, right?
Yeah, right.
Thanks,
My next 6 weeks worth of rides combined.
A lot. It's a really happy ride. Thank you all.
Thank you.
See ya, thanks.
Next item up is we have got housing strategic plan update.
Do you need IT to let me share my screen?
They are paying attention.
Okay.
Remotely, so, it might happen on its own. I think, Bond should be listening in perhaps and may, let you in to share your screen or come flying through those doors any second.
In the meantime, I do have copies of the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan.
Do it again, 3.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thanks. I am in the Zoom meeting, but I just, I think I'm in the room.
What's your name?
I guess, Matthew, it was a 5 countdown, I guess. Yeah, it was a 5 countdown.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not good. I can't nail the 3-second countdowns.
I think
I've got
logged in.
one.
Got one, thanks.
Okay. It should be like Liz or Elizabeth, yeah.
I think I have this too.
You're downstairs, I'll make you a panelist.
Okay, sounds good. Well, all right, we have a second then. Happy Monday.
So I'll fill some airtime. Part of the objective of today is not only that we provide council with an update every 6 months in the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. I'm sure Liz will remind you that council adopted this strategic plan in April of last year. And so we've been back twice now. I think this is the 3rd time we'll be back. And so regular updates. The second purpose is going into your retreat. So just to give you a reminder of where we are, what's happening on all 14 of the action items that council directed staff to follow. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to introduce myself, especially to the new council members. My name is Liz Axberg, and I'm the Housing Policy Analyst for the City of Aspen. Do I need both?
It doesn't hurt.
Okay. Oh, I can
Nice to
hear
meet
it
you,
now.
Liz.
Okay, yeah, nice to meet you both too. And so I've been with the city since July about, so I'll be approaching a year soon. And so today I'll be updating you on the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan, which was implemented in May of 2022, and staff across all departments have been working on it collaboratively since. And the goal of today, like Diane alluded to, is to just provide a high-level overview of the different action items within the strategic plan and the progress that we've made since then. And our last update was in November. It was on November 14th, 2022. So some items might not have too much for an update, but we're still going to be providing an overview of it, especially for you two, and any other updates that we can make. And also, I'm happy to field questions throughout. So first, where's the strategic plan come from? Previous council had it in their council goals to create an affordable housing strategic plan. And so check, that got done May 2022. And we created this packet that I handed out, Diane handed out to you all.
And I want to add a little bit to that, and
Yeah, go ahead.
Bill and Sam, just for some context, because I'm really excited about where we are with this. It was a couple years ago that the council had a conversation around housing. Obviously, it's one of the most pressing issues that we deal with all the time. And, we didn't have this strategic plan, and really, the name strategic plan is, but more than that, it really is probably the first document that we've created that kind of laid everything out. Because for a long time, we've been talking about, hey, how many units should we, could we, would we build? What about deed restrictions that are sunsetting, maintenance, and so there were all these factors of different ways that we could attack affordable housing in our community, but they were never really coalesced into something to get everybody literally on the same page. So that's why the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan was created and adopted by council, is just really so that we're all talking about the same opportunities as well as challenges.
Great, thanks for that background, Tori. So the goal within the strategic plan was to create 500 affordable housing units by 2026. And this goal was going to be achieved in the Aspen's urban growth boundary through both development and development neutral strategies, and also some collaborative work with the public sector, us, and the private sector as well. So across all fronts. And on the right side there, that's the 14 action items that we're going to be going through today. And that's the 14 actions we're taking to reach this goal of 500 affordable housing units. And the list goes in order of priority, and that was decided just through the yield of the affordable housing units and the cost, and if it was development neutral or not.
And I'm sure that there might be a question about how 500 was arrived at.
Yes, I was gonna ask it.
So I don't know if you want to discuss that. It might actually have, that conversation might have happened a little before you were onboarded or so, but I don't, maybe Diane, you want to tackle this, because we went through a small exercise around this kind of thing to get to a number.
Sure. There's a page in your, in the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan that is a weighted matrix. So staff brought to council a number of factors such as cost, where is it located, and other factors, and then weighted those. Council then modified those factors and then re-weighted them, and so we came out with those. Then we looked and applied to those actions how many units we thought could be generated within that time frame. And not necessarily reasonably, I would say this is an aggressive plan. And then council went ahead and then decided how many units they wanted out of each of those actions.
And then, and individual council members, had their own maybe methodology, right? So we all put together basically our 500, I think, comes out as a median of what 5 members of council kind of put in. So some were higher than 500, some were lower than 500, and it was based off of, different factors. The matrix that Diane created did help inform some of our opportunities, but 500, just came together as an average of the 5 and an average of the methodology that we as individuals use, because I know some people use some of their aspirations more for their number, as other people use the matrix a little bit more for their number. Anyway, just for context.
And thanks, Tori, and to be, we actually use median, because that'll affect the highs and the lows. And the actual final number was 501, and council agreed that 500 was a better number than 501.
This sounds better.
Liz, are you sure you don't mind questions as we go?
It's fine. So that way, because there's 14 action items, I think it's just easier to do it as we're on that action item.
Well, in that case, I'll take advantage of that. Thanks. And you may not have been part of this. Maybe Diane knows the answer to this, but has there ever been, or has there recently been, analysis on what the upper limit of the number of workforce housing units could be in this community? What could our community sustain? I know 500 isn't a goal, it's an aspirational number. One part, something that's always made me uneasy and that I've always struggled with is that workforce housing development is growth, and it does change the character of our community. I'm a proponent of it, but it needs to be acknowledged, and I've never seen any information that has shown us how much is really acceptable as an upper limit.
We haven't done that analysis.
But not just about affordable housing. Are you talking about things like water supply?
I'm talking about growth in housing units in the city of Aspen.
So all growth?
All growth, but the overwhelming majority is coming from workforce housing development, not from the free market. Most free market is infill.
Yeah, no problem. We might have water information. Or Tyler, we do have a service capacity for our water, perhaps.
I think that's a piece of the puzzle. But I think it's more than just the technical side of it. I think the technical side of it is important. Is can we provide water? Can we provide power? Can we provide school resources? I think there's a long list of criteria that are worth talking about. But
Yeah.
How much growth do we really want? And it's growth.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's real growth. And if you said, okay, we got this opportunity to build 2,000 workforce housing units tomorrow, and we can figure out how to do it economically viably, et cetera, is that what we really want? I think that changes the character of Aspen tremendously. So I think, to me, the reason I say this, and I know this is more of a statement than a question, it's really difficult for me to evaluate whether 500 is appropriate if I don't understand how far that gets us towards our end game goal.
Okay. Yeah, there's more conversation there. Part of what you just touched on is philosophy. And you're right, there are technical limitations. The phraseology that comes to my mind is called carrying capacity. But that's different than people's individual visions for density and growth in this valley, in this location, et cetera. So I totally get what you're saying, and I think there is definitely maybe a ceiling that's a good number to be aware of. Pete just came up to.
Well, just as thinking about
'cause-
that question, I think part of it is also on the number of bedrooms being utilized right now and some of the policies that are being looked at on downsizing to take advantage of existing development that will reduce the number of need you have at the high end. Same thing could be true in some other cases in terms of, how long do folks retire in their units for? That's not a workforce unit so much anymore. They did definitely put in all of those hours for this community, and so that's something that the council has also discussed and wrestled with in the past. But those types of policies have an influence on that total cap.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's worth looking at holistically, and maybe something that would help me at least is maybe the goal should be talking about what the population number that we should be housing in our workforce housing programs in APSHA, rather than the number of units or the number of new units. It's like what's our goal of how many people to house, and that blends all of those initiatives that Pete alluded to. Maybe that's a different way of looking at it that we can all comprehend a little bit better. At least I would be able to.
It's literally the kind of almost existential for many people. It's the existential question of being in Aspen or not. So we could have this conversation in 100 different ways. And there's both changing variables, but also changing opportunities and challenges too.
Just a quick note on the goal. Half of those units, roughly half, are development neutral, right? So it is not new development. The other piece you'll see as we go through here that there are, like for voluntary right sizing, we estimated 30 units, right? And I can tell you, Matthew would update that number today based on the programs that APSHA is now looking at and other things they're trying to do. The other important piece is that the analysis on the empty bedrooms, I believe, happened after this was published, and so we know a lot more about the number of empty bedrooms, and we know where they are in APSHA. Thanks.
Any more discussion, questions on just this first step out of the box with this goal that was identified? And it's, it's changeable, it's mutable as we go. So, all right, let's keep going.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, before we hop into the action items, I just want to highlight how many people have put work into this presentation, the memo, and all the affordable housing action items. Some of them are in this room here, like Pete might jump up if we need to answer a specific question. And also, this list doesn't even include everybody that has put work into the strategic plan, so I just wanted to highlight that as well. So number one is expiring deed restrictions. There were 324 affordable housing deed restrictions with sunset dates when we implemented the strategic plan. 244 of them rental and 79 ownership. And the strategic plan outlined that the goal to preserve at least 200 of these and replace them by 2026, and even eventually all of the sunsetting dates as well. And right now, APSHA just automatically updates deed restrictions and takes out the sunset dates whenever a property is sold, transferred, inherited, any type of deed turnover. And so since November, we've had one additional property removed from the list, an ownership unit, and since implementation of the plan, we've had two. So that leaves us with 322 expiring deed restrictions left. And so with this one, staff are still just working, outlining strategies for targeting these expiring deed restrictions, and council should expect a work session on the subject by the end of 2023. Number two is the lumberyard. As you all know, over by the Aspen Airport, by Mountain Rescue. So it's 195 rentals, 92 affordable ownership units. And this is just number two because of the high yield of affordable housing units. And the goal is to start demolition work by 2024. As of right now, there's been 2 hearings with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the project team is hoping to schedule a public hearing with council by late May 2023, getting that on the calendar. And a lot of different applications have been getting submitted for this as well, just laying the groundwork. For example, in November, the land use application was submitted to community development. Recently, there was a access permit application submitted to CDOT to allow for the traffic intersection at the development site. And construction of this will be phased. So again, demolition starting 2024. Scott, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just an update with planning and zoning. Is this on? With planning and zoning, they approved that project last Tuesday.
Oh, great.
And with conditions, so it's on its way to city council.
Liz, I have a question on the sunsetting deed restrictions
Oh,
and on lumberyard. Sorry, I didn't know if you had more to present on that one.
No, it's fine.
Could you talk a little bit on the deed restrictions about what strategies are being considered to compensate owners for getting rid of the expiring deed restrictions?
I'll just jump in. We do plan on coming back to council on this one, and so at this point, we actually would prefer not to share strategies because we think that that should first be a discussion. We should bring that to council.
Okay. And then lumberyard. Thank you, by the way. Has staff been approached proactively by any private sector potential partners?
I'd say we have as kind of a general interest, and what we have told them is that we anticipate that there will be an RFP looking for development partners, and that will probably be late this year, early next year. And that's the conversation we've had with council as well, that at some point we want to do an RFP, see who's available. I think we'll probably do an RFQ, look for qualifications heading towards an RFP. But that's definitely in the plan.
Yeah, I have some ideas on that. Any broad stroke takeaways from those partners on what they think they could make work versus what the city has designed and conceptualized?
It's hard to tell because we don't want to get into real detailed conversations with them. However, and as you probably know, PPPs, there's there's probably hundreds of combinations and possibilities. I do remember one developer that was interested in a portion of the project, not the whole project. And we are looking at phasing that project so that a smaller developer would be able to take on that, a smaller phase. There's interest in tax credits projects, and then there's interest in that has nothing to do with tax credits. So there's pretty wide range.
Thanks.
Any additional questions on the lumberyard? Okay. Next, we move into Burlingame Ranch, Phase 3. So this is the 79 additional units at Burlingame. And as has been discussed at council previously several times, there's just ongoing construction delays. But now repairs have been approaching completion, and soon hopefully we can have an update of when we can release that sales schedule for these units. And in March 2023, that project team came to council, where council approved the category distribution for the different units at Burlingame, as well as the right sizing pilot program to occur at the development as well.
And I can add an update there. Repairs are proceeding. One of the elements that is being replaced is 280 windows, and more than half of those windows have now been replaced. So things are proceeding, and I believe Councilman Guth and Rose, you're going to visit the site later this week. If anybody else wants an updated visit, let us know and we'll set that up as well.
Action item 4, we have community development policy analysis. So this action item involves just how we can continue to develop and evaluate different policy and land use code that supports affordable housing development. And the bulk of this action item happened during the moratorium of the summer 2022 and through ordinances 13 and 14. And so this action item hasn't changed too much since the last presentation, but I want to go through it all again. So ordinances 13 and 14, the main progress made through there was having a separate review process for affordable housing projects, just to expedite them a little bit more, and allowing for tri- and fourplex developments to allow more density. We have just finding any unintended barriers to affordable housing development that existed in the code, taking those out. There was increased mitigation requirements to include basements and garages into those calculations. And then also fee and lieu was increased just to represent increasing construction costs in the valley. And so the next steps is ComDev is continuing to evaluate the impacts of these policy changes and will update as needed. Along with this, though, there might be additional changes depending on proposed statewide legislation, as noted here, particularly 213 and 1255. So depending on where those statewide legislations go, there might be some tweaks here and there. But ComDev, I know, has been working with state representatives and making recommendations to the language in those codes.
Is the square footage allowed for an affordable housing project the same for a free market project on each lot?
I think Ben should take this.
In essence, yes. During the moratorium, there was discussion in the community about increasing both density and intensity, the number of units, floor area, height, et cetera. And it was pretty clear that the community wanted more affordable housing, but they wanted it to be consistent with the character. So we did not make any changes to underlying zone districts or the densities that have been present in the code for a long time.
But the existing ones are already more dense than single-family uses or free market uses?
Yes, and they're going back probably, I think the first that I have seen, say the sort of additional density and height associated with multifamily, not necessarily affordable, but just multifamily in general, at least 25 years ago, those decisions were made in RMF, particularly on Main Street, to give some additional space for multifamily.
Thank you.
Ben, stay there. I have one that you probably want to answer. So I'm concerned with one particular potential unintended consequence as a result of removing intended and unintended limitations on housing development. And that's specifically with historic properties and some of the barriers that were removed there in an effort to streamline the process. And I'm concerned that on certain historic properties, the proposed new development on those sites may overwhelm and detract from the historic resources and the value of those. And so to frame this as a question, I'm going to ask, are you paying attention to that? Are you aware of that? How do we make sure we don't get too far down the road and regret that decision? Or those decisions, I should say.
Very briefly, I'm happy to talk about this extensively, but because yes, of course, we're paying attention to it. There's a case going through review right now that obviously there's been some discussion about it. But I do think that, to be clear, these are for projects, you know, the new streamlined process were for projects that were entirely code compliant. They didn't need variances, they didn't need variations. They were consistent with parking, consistent with height, consistent with floor area. And I think importantly as well, related to other historic preservation projects that we have in town, oftentimes, you know, there are underlying zone requirements around height and floor area, et cetera, that, you know, whether it's in a single family, where often those projects sort of go very close up to the allowable for the underlying zone district. I think where the intersection is are projects on Main Street and projects in RMF, where there's additional intensity allowed for multifamily. And I would point to projects like Poppies. I would point to a project that's got approvals that has not yet pursued a building permit at 611 West Main, where I think you see really successful relationships of historic resources that are not connected to the multifamily that are there, that the rest of the development is consistent with the underlying zoning. So I think that that's what we were trying to facilitate. You know, it's not that the historic preservation design guidelines are going away. It's just that, you know, I think that our perception was that Historic Preservation Commission had a real struggle evaluating historic preservation outcomes with the development rights that were present in those zone districts. And it was a tension. And, you know, it turned into some really difficult conversations. So that's what we were trying to pursue, but certainly as this process plays out, we'll certainly evaluate.
Yeah, I get the intention there, and thank you for that detailed response. I think the example that I would use to point out my concern and where the concerns of others comes from is, someone else might remember the exact address, but on East Cooper, Sue Lum's cabin, I think there was a lot of concern that the proposed development was going to really overwhelm and detract from the historic resource. So I'm just really hesitant to see small cabins that are engulfed with multifamily affordable housing, workforce housing. I think that would be detrimental to the historic structures that we value in this community. So I ask that you pay attention to this and watch it, and maybe we need to sort of fall somewhere back in between where we were and where we are now.
I appreciate that. Now, I think the address is 1020 East Cooper, and I don't think it's constructed.
No.
So I don't know that we know that it's going to overwhelm it, or if it's gonna overwhelm it any more than the current codes that we have are, even when it's single-family redevelopment of a historic resource. I don't know how you feel about, the redevelopment that we see in the West End, whether it's so, I don't know, do you think that the historic preservation program has been working to this point on West End properties that are single-family homes? Because for me, I gotta be honest, I think they overwhelm them. I don't know, and I have this conversation often, just about, what are we getting out of our historic preservation when it comes to really, saving properties for the lessons that we learn and for the character of our town. So I appreciate what you're saying, because you want to preserve historic resources, but I would ask you, and maybe this is something that we want to, and this will come up at the retreat if we want to be talking more about the historic preservation program, but do you think that the historic preservation program has been working in single-family residences in the West End, and do you think that this affordable housing is somehow going to be different than it meaning worse?
Yes, thanks for asking that question. So I do think it's been working well, and I think I can distill the sentiment that an untrained eye can really distinguish between a beautifully preserved Victorian structure and a new addition. And so to me, that means it works well. Are they sometimes large relative to the scale of the historic structure? Yes, and that's kind of where the same concern comes from. But I think the key distinction here is that the density allowed in certain districts and for certain uses, namely multifamily, is significantly greater than that for single family or duplex.
Yeah.
So the building that, the addition, if you will, or the new development on that site for the use of multifamily is going to be a lot bigger than if it were free market, single family or duplex.
And can I add to that, I've heard similar comments, and I would just love to see the Historic Preservation Commission weigh in on the change in ordinance to see if there is regret amongst themselves or whether they think it's working the way it should. Because they're the ones that are the frontline soldiers when it comes to historic preservation, and if it changed and there's regret, I just would want to know that. That's just how I feel about that one.
All right, we'll bring this back for discussion at the retreat, the overall historic preservation program, because I'm not disagreeing with anything. I think I have a different perspective on it, and I would like to have a more in-depth conversation to understand where the nature of your comments come from. But that's not here now. We're only on action item number 4. We have 10 more to go. There is another fascinating meeting going on next door at the library, so if there's any chance of moving through this, it'd be great to be able to make that meeting as well. Before you do, I just want to say to Sam and Bill again, this is really, it's not just our latest update, but this is really our first update where we are starting to talk about how the teeth of these different gears work together. So, it's great that you guys are here right now, because your input and your perspective on these is as valuable as it's ever been, because we are just now able to take this information from the strategic plan and start talking about what our priorities are and what do we see in our programs that we need to change. So awesome. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, of course. So next is the Affordable Housing Credits Program. So this was created like 12 years ago and just to incentivize affordable housing development. But due to time and market conditions changing, updates have been deemed necessary. So in December 12th, 2022, staff held a work session to propose changes led by Ben. And currently, staff are working with Design Workshop to continue mapping out different ideas and strategies to make this program continue to work. And council should expect possibly June 22 work session to discuss potential changes once again. And staff are just continuing to evaluate this program to find ways to better utilize it. Anything to add to that, Ben?
We're getting pretty close on a proposed ordinance. We had a good conversation with APSHA last week, but some fairly targeted changes to the credits program. But I would say we're probably end of June for first reading on a potential ordinance with some targeted changes.
One quick comment is I really like the creativity of contemplating issuing age credits as an incentive for right sizing. So I think that is the right direction, something like that. If not straight cash, I think that's what it's going to take to make right sizing successful, in my opinion. And then I wanted to ask, where does the sentiment that the city needs to be involved in the credits market come from in terms of a purchaser? I'm not sure that's necessary.
When we have had conversations with the development community, I think for small projects that were kind of the heart of the program as it sort of rolled out over its, first iterations, they were smaller projects and most of them were self-financed or financing that came in through kind of non-traditional mechanisms. But as projects have scaled and as other folks have tried to get into the program, we heard pretty clearly that the inability of traditional financial institutions to value our credits in a project's pro forma made it really difficult to make lending decisions towards those projects. And so we heard from a variety of folks that if there was some mechanism where the value of those credits could be guaranteed through some mechanism, that would fundamentally change the sort of way that those projects functioned as they were going out for financing, et cetera. And so whether that would be using a bonding mechanism, whether that would be the city guaranteeing some kind of floor price for an affordable housing credit, whether that be the city willing to, buy X numbers of credits that were those were some of the solutions that were posed to us as we talked about it. I think any of those things would likely involve the use of the 150 fund in some way. And I don't think that we're quite there yet. And, we haven't heard to this point on several of the other proposals that are going to be coming forward in a code change. We've heard pretty clear support from those things from council in previous discussions. But I think there's been various perspectives on council about that intervention into the market. And because of all the other priorities, I think for the 150 fund, we've kind of held off on kind of pursuing that in a direct way.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I guess I understand the concern, but I'm not sure the concern is that big or exists at this point in time. I mean, I feel that I could probably go out and get a pre-sale agreement for any credits that I could possibly develop today, at least, and that should work for a bank. If I said, okay, I'm going to deliver 5 credits in 2 years and the price is X per credit, I think that works. I'm not sure we're helping anything there, so, yeah.
We agree. This is why it's coming back to us again, because this has been a true wrestling match, and so again, this is where your insight and your perspective are going to be very helpful because, as these guys are saying, they're trying to figure out ways. I mean, the ultimate goal is not about the credits program. The ultimate goal is about affordable housing. So just using this as one of those tools, and these guys are going around the wheel with it as well. So your input on this is very helpful.
Thank you, Mayor Torrey. Councilmember Guth, your point is an excellent one. And I think one of the dynamics that we find we're dealing with is that there are credits that have been issued that have not been brought to market. And that's something that we're dealing with, I think, internally. We have been for over a year now. And the dynamic that that's creating is it's simultaneously putting a lot of upward pressure on the value of credits that are being brought to market, so that maybe they're not as affordable for a potential buyer as they could be. And so is that sort of altering market dynamics on one end of the equation? And then on the other end of the equation, we don't have any credits that are available to extinguish for mitigation for other people's projects. And so we find ourselves having to come back to council on behalf of applicants, asking for fee in lieu. And so the sort of suggestion that the city intervene in the market in some way is frankly a response to some of the slowness, it seems like, that's in the market presently to bring some of those existing credits actually to bear for sale for people. So that's something that we don't have a direct response to.
Yeah, it's a tiny market, and it's a synthetic market that we've created, which is not a bad thing. It's just we've created a synthetic market to accomplish our goals. And we know why a lot of those credits are not coming to market yet. They're being stockpiled to offset development in the pipeline. Valid concerns. I'm not sure how the city intervening in the market really addresses those, but I understand your point. Thank you.
And we fully recognize those concerns and share them. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. All right, next is developing the financial resources to create affordable housing, or whether it be expiring deed restrictions, land banking, all of the other action items that need funding. So the main advancements in this area would be short-term rental tax, which was approved in the November 8th election, and collection began on May 1st, so this month. And that's estimated to generate around $6 million to go towards affordable housing development, acquiring, and maintenance. And then down the road, staff also will be looking to engage with the community and council to extend the sunset dates on the 1% real estate transfer tax and the sales tax. And it's important just to extend these sunset dates as we plan for the future and can make budget projections.
Again, this is developing financial resources. Just another action item. Do you have any comments here?
A comment, not a question.
Sure.
The only comment would be, I struggle with contemplating finding more money without committing to how much money we actually need.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
we don't have a plan to pay for lumberyard, but we want to create financial resources to pay for it. We don't know how much it's going to cost. It's a little backwards to me.
It's not just backwards, it's back and forth. So, yeah. Action item number 6 needs attention.
Right. This is basically the right sizing action item. So the goal of this is to just decrease the number of spare bedrooms in the APSHA inventory. Right sizing would reallocate bedrooms so that, for example, people who have had kids moved out can move into a smaller home, and then someone who's looking to grow their family, need more bedrooms, can move into there. So on the right here is just a graphic from when we did a right sizing survey over the summer. Sorry if that's kind of small, but I'll outline. So we did a survey and we just asked APSHA owners, would you be interested in right sizing if you had the opportunity? And about 19% of 3 and 4 bedroom owners said yes. And that would be the purple bar there. And 54% of 4 bedroom owners had said maybe. So that shows that we really just need a pilot program to really see who is interested, what that's going to look like. And so April 2023, the APSHA board approved a right sizing program, which is going to allow for 5 houses to make a swap. And we're hoping to launch that pilot program in May 2023. And as I mentioned earlier, also council in March did approve 5 units for right sizing at the Burlingame development as well.
Liz, what's the plan for scaling this if the pilot works?
Scaling it? I think it really depends how the pilot goes. And that's why we're starting with 5, just to also see what type of response we get. And because we really don't know how many people are going to be actually interested in doing a right sizing program.
I understand that's the
Yeah.
purpose of the pilot, but I would challenge you that if, let's say this goes overwhelmingly well and we don't have to expend financial resources or issue credits or any other potential incentive to do it, which I'm skeptical about, but let's say that happens, I think you need to be ready to roll this out quickly. It's a development neutral way to increase utilization. I don't think you should wait to see how it goes. I think if it works, we should have a plan to roll it out. And my criticism would be letting the swappers, for lack of a better term, find each other is inefficient and not scalable. I think right sizing is a great idea. I think it can really increase utilization in our program. I think taking baby steps towards it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I believe that ultimately we're going to have to incentivize people financially to do this, which I have no problem with.
Just a comment, it'll be really interesting, right? The swap program, as you pointed out, if APSHA has to create a marketplace, right, there's overhead, so that would take a little longer to roll out. It's probably easier to roll out the swap program. What will be really interesting is about the survey that Liz and the APSHA team did last summer asked about incentives and what would people want. So I think what you're going to see is what are people going to want, and incentives. It may be possible to create incentives that don't have monetary value, such as the ability to maintain your current categorization or your initial categorization, right? That is probably the biggest barrier to any program, which is why a straight swap program is quite good. However, APSHA could look at allowing that to happen in the future, which could be I think being able to look at non-monetary incentives, given what we think, the impact to the 150 funds is going to be over time anyway, right? Because every time we provide financial incentives, it means we're not building another unit. Thanks.
Yeah, I think developing a menu of potential incentives, financial and not, is smart.
All right, thank you. So number 8 is partnerships. So the City of Aspen is always looking for partnership opportunities just to leverage our resources, purchase more housing units than we could do on our own. The only current agreement really ongoing is at the Forest Service lot, and the details of this agreement are still being negotiated. So nothing else new to report in this besides staff are still working on this negotiation and looking for other opportunities.
Liz, I have one quick question on this. How is staff determining how to allocate resources on potential partnerships? Meaning, how much time should be spent on a potential 4-unit partnership versus a 400-unit partnership?
I want to make sure I understand your question. How are we allocating time to those?
So Forest Service lot, I'm not super familiar with that. I don't know what the potential maximum outcome in terms of units or bedrooms is there. But I personally would rather have staff work on high-impact projects than 4 units in the West End. I think it's a waste of staff time. Maybe there's a way to think about overall incentives to how to get the private market to deliver those 4 units. But I think putting staff resources on one-off small sites like that is ineffective and inefficient.
I believe the number they're looking at right now is in the 20s, 20-some units. And we have let the other partners take the lead on this. We attend some meetings, but we're not spending a lot of time on that agreement. More to come, but I believe the school district and the community college are taking the lead. And look, if we can get a couple of units out of it for not a lot of effort, it might be worth it.
Thanks.
on partnerships too, we just completed a partnership with Jason Bradshaw on 3 projects that gained us, I think, 40 to 50 units. We learned a lot from that, and we look forward to, as we said, looking forward at the lumberyard. I think partnerships will be a big part of how we develop that property. One other thing I wanted to catch up on the housing credits, another discussion about housing credits. Obviously, at this point, the city is not allowed to participate in that. But one conversation we want to have is if we do, say we attract some partners for the lumberyard, there needs to be a discussion about allowing a partner to create and issue credits on a partnership with the city. So just further thought.
Thanks, Scott.
So compliance, making sure that people who are in full compliance are living in APSHA units. So APSHA does uphold a compliance program, verifies and investigates all compliance complaints as well. And every other year, APSHA owners do have to respond to a biennial affidavit to attest that they still qualify for APSHA housing. So the 2023 affidavit was sent out in April, and I believe that response has been great, but APSHA makes sure that they follow up with anybody who's not in compliance that responds to the affidavit. And another really big piece of progress made with this as well is that APSHA hired a new compliance analyst this year, Jackie. And with that, APSHA is going to be able to institutionalize compliance practices, review cases, with a lot more speed, and just increase compliance overall within the APSHA program. And I believe that they're planning that the compliance officer is going to audit a fraction of owners as well from the affidavit.
Liz, are the affidavits sent to everyone in odd years? Is that how it works, or is it half each year?
No, it's everyone, every
In odd
other year.
years?
Yep.
Okay. So in the 2021 affidavit, how many people said they were not in compliance?
Actually, I
You know
don't
that?
have that number from the top of my head.
So I believe we were pretty close to 100% compliant. Matthew, Phil.
Had 100%.
Yeah, Phil, ready to come up. Thanks.
We did have 100% compliance with the affidavit. We had to threaten to take one gentleman to court, but we got there. And there were a couple things that were flagged which we ironed out. But the point of the audit program was we're going to go deeper this cycle and actually proactively reach out and get more detail on a number of cases, and then we'll be reporting the results of those audits to actually get a better snapshot of what the situation is. And that was, in 2021 was also.
To make sure I understand, all but one person?
No, all.
So all people reported themselves as being compliant?
They completed the affidavit, and there were a couple, and some of that information we did address and ironed out the situation. So nobody was evicted or made to sell because of the affidavit. But then this cycle, well, that was complicated as well under the pandemic restrictions, but we are going to do the audit some of them this year to delve a little deeper into that process and actually confirm the affidavit information.
Right, so based on that statement, Matthew, you are skeptical that the self-reporting of compliance is
I'm not
accurate.
skeptical or not skeptical, I just want to see what's going on.
Thanks.
So other APSHA policy actions to increase the number of available units. So we did that. I did a spare bedroom analysis in December of 2022, and while right sizing does target to eliminate that number, which is around 480 to 500 spare bedrooms, not all spare bedrooms exist for that specific case. So there's other ways also to eliminate this. For example, APSHA has done some social media work to show that you can rent out spare bedrooms in your homes as well. And with hiring a compliance officer, APSHA staff are hoping they'll have more time and resources to focus on this action item and continue looking at what types of policies and regulation changes that we can make to continue bringing that spare bedroom number down. But otherwise, right sizing also falls into this category as well, as it's a policy to decrease that number of spare bedrooms. Okay. Next is the sustainability of APSHA deed restricted housing, as in sustainability means just the condition and longevity of these units. And so we are doing a few things right now to, in this realm. So first is HOA engagement. We recently sent out an HOA contact survey just to make sure that all of our contact information with HOA representatives is up to date. And that way we can start doing more types of workshops with them. In May, I believe APSHA is having someone come and just talk about, lead a workshop on how to better run your HOA, and they're planning on doing more workshops like that down the road. And also after the survey, we're looking to possibly help HOAs fund capital reserve studies as well, but that's still kind of in the beginning phases. Along with that, right now at APSHA, we're proposing a pilot grant program for APSHA homeowners to make essential repairs on their homes. This right now is just it's still with the APSHA board, but it will eventually be coming to City Council and the BOCC, as we'll be requesting funding from these entities to fund this essential home repair program. And lastly, also APSHA recently purchased 2 Woody Creek units, and the plan with those is to make upgrades and sell them back to qualified owners. And so that's kind of a way to test how APSHA can do that in the future too, to continue updating homes.
Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, did I interrupt?
Nope, go right ahead.
This may be a Jim question. Maybe not. Do we have an ability both for existing and newly created HOAs to require not just regular reserve studies, but compliance with the recommendations of those regular reserve studies?
Well, it's part of all of the discussion we're trying to have about, and that APSHA has been having for years about HOAs, what HOAs should do and can do, but it's related to what is in a deed restriction.
So does that mean impossible on existing, but possible on newly created HOAs or new deed restrictions?
That's one of the arguments that we're addressing, or one of the issues that we're discussing and addressing as it relates to existing deed restrictions versus what new deed restrictions require.
Okay, I think we should be thinking about that, because it's one thing to know how much money you're supposed to fund your reserves, and it's another thing to actually fund those reserves.
That's part of, that has been part of a lot of discussions that APSHA has been having and we've been having.
And then I also think that there's a scary point in our APSHA inventory, ownership inventory, coming with obsolescence. And I think that this falls under this category. So have you guys been contemplating what happens when a complex gets condemned? What happens when a complex is in such bad condition that no one wants to purchase those units anymore? How do we address that from a funding standpoint, from a deed restriction standpoint? I know we haven't had a lot of it, other than maybe the Centennial example, but it's coming. A lot of this inventory is aging, and there's no economic scenario that I can understand that it makes sense for the owners to rebuild their complex themselves as individuals or as an HOA collectively. So I don't think we have any kind of solution for them, and I don't think they're going to develop a solution on their own. So I think it's incumbent on us to think ahead on this one and say, what happens when, name this 50, 60-year-old complex falls down or is about to fall down? And what happens then?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we're doing, specifically with the 2 Woody Creek units, where APSHA is kind of taking control, purchasing these units, making upgrades, and selling it back into the inventory. And so that's exactly what this action item is trying to look towards. How can we invest in these properties now so that these properties that were built in the 80s are going to last us so much longer?
Right.
And I'll add to Liz's answer is that that team, that cross-departmental team, where we formed an affordable housing team. Liz and I are in the city manager's office, but everyone else is spread across the city. That team has had multiple discussions specifically about the age of the properties. And it is a tough nut, and it's a, that's not to say it shouldn't be addressed, and it likely needs to be addressed in partnership with the owners, not exclusively as a, the city needs to fix it. Thanks.
Agree.
Okay. So additional development neutral program elements. So previously, when this was put into strategic plan, it was sort of gave way for some flexibility for staff to build out this plan. And so it mainly includes 2 elements. So policies to just to be converting free market units into deed restricted units, and also ways to create more revenue streams to make this possible as well. So the biggest accomplishment in this area would be the 1235 East Cooper's 8 2-bedroom apartments that were converted into deed restricted housing for the school district. So this was a big success and really made possible by collaborative efforts between staff. It was between ComDev and APSHA, and within this plan, staff believe that more projects like this are going to be possible down the road as well, to just have more flexibility to create and take on more development neutral projects. And a lot of the work with affordable housing credits program is going to fall into this action item as well, just possibly more flexibility for redevelopment projects and anything that involves converting. And one other thing that is mentioned in this action item in the strategic plan document, it's not on here, but there is discussion of a buy-down program. And later we are going to talk about that with the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. A buy-down program isn't necessarily possible in Aspen itself, but on a region-wide, it's possible. So, and that's another development neutral strategy. So it's not on the slide, but there is work to develop a buy-down program being done as well.
Liz, was the school district able to generate credits at 1235 East Cooper?
Here comes Ben.
The previous owner converted from free market 2 credits, and then the property was transacted following the generation of the credits.
Thanks.
Exactly. Okay. Number 13. All right, land banking. So similar to partnerships, the city of Aspen just is always on the lookout for opportunities, and purchasing land as viable opportunities do come up as well. Just so down the road we can use it for development ourselves or trading, anything in that realm. So the current success of land banking right now would be the lumber yard, and there's no other properties right now that haven't been developed that the city has land banked. And so right now, nothing else new to report, just that staff is continuing to search for possible opportunities. And then last is regional collaboration. So the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition is the bulk of this action item. And they officially became a nonprofit over the summer. There's 9 different government and entities and organizations from the Roaring Fork Valley in here, and each of them, including the city of Aspen, committed $10,000 at the start to get the coalition up and running. And so right now the coalition is just working to map out strategies and programs and secure funding to make those possible as well. So most recently, they received a $50,000 DOLA grant for strategic planning. They received a $100,000 IHOP grant to do a policy scan, which the city partook in. And that was just seeing the different policies that government entities have towards affordable housing across the valley and seeing how we can better align. So they've been working on that policy scan, and they also got a $25,000 grant from CHAFA just to support outreach. So right now they're doing a renters survey, which I encourage people to take. There is a website for the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. And along with this, they recently mapped out a rental funds program and a buy-down program. And so they just right now submitted a grant to try to get funding for this buy-down program. And the City of Aspen staff continue to engage as board members. Diane Foster, the Assistant City Manager, is on the board, and then Jen Uten, who is the City Senior Special Projects Manager, she is an alternate for the board as well. And they both regularly attend the meetings. So our goal is to update you on the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan about every 6 months. So today was 6 months since the previous one. And you're going to get a lot of updates in between there as well. As we kind of mentioned throughout the presentation, like in June, the Affordable Housing Credits Program, or upcoming lumberyard public hearings with council as well. So is there any questions as now that we have the full picture?
Anything immediate, Sam?
Oh, there's a comment that I just think development neutral is definitely, should be like number 12, additional development neutral. I just think it should be a higher priority. I think development neutral is the way to go. And we talked about like right sizing, expiring deed restrictions, and then just wondering if there could be more outreach done to certain buildings in town that are sort of in disrepair and could be affordable housing if the developer actually got on board for those.
And Sam, to your point, right, expiring deed restrictions is number one. We just kind of, we put this one at the end because we said, we know there are more out there, and frankly, we didn't really think a buy-down program for Aspen was so viable. However, the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition is now making that possible, and in the future, if council would like, we could come talk to you about the city of Aspen, you know, funding a deed restriction for people who work in City of Aspen but live anywhere in the valley, that kind of buy down. That could be a possibility. While initially we didn't think buy downs would work. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. John?
No comments. Great work. I like where this is going.
Bill?
Yeah, I'd echo what John said. There's great work here. I commend past councils on what they've done here. I obviously have ongoing concerns and want to dive deeper into certain things, but it's great work. I think we will end up with a more sustainable program at the end of this effort, and an improved program.
Thanks for that. Liz, I just have one question. Do you mind, could somebody talk to us a little bit about partnerships? There are many different kinds of partnerships when it comes to affordable housing. Can somebody just real quickly, could you outline 3 of them? I mean, there's financial partners, right? There's development partners, there's tenant partners, there's so many partnerships. So just, yeah. For example, the tax credit partner, I guess you would say, Jason Bradshaw would be. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the different opportunities when we talk about the term partnership in affordable housing? What are our opportunities there?
Well, I'm not going to remember all the details, but we basically brought the land to the partnership. He brought the ability to fund the entitlements, and trying to remember, I think he has a 30-year land lease on the land. At the end of that 30 years, the property becomes the city's property. So I think, there's many different things that motivate developers. That one was probably the tax credits. We could, we could have a partner come in and, just, I don't know, maybe we would, divide a parcel of land, let the private developer have part, and we take part, the developer develop both properties. There's just so many possibilities.
How about one more?
One more.
I guess, like, I mean, we could choose an entity, like ski company, and be a financial partner on a development, I guess ultimately, anyway.
Sure, yeah, we could be a partner with other nonprofits, form a corporation, a public corporation.
All right.
Everybody have shares in that development?
I think there's a million permutations
Yeah.
of what this partnership could look like on a project like the lumberyard, and there could be multiple partnerships. A way that I've been thinking about this is, let's put it out there to the private marketplace to inform us about how the partnership could look. Because I think that we risk narrowing our options by explaining to the private market how the partnership's gonna look.
And that's why I bring this up, is because we need to start having this conversation. When we talk about partnerships, this falls into the category, like, it needs its own strategic plan, a partnership strategic plan, because we all use the term, but what are we really talking about? What are our opportunities and challenges? So I just want to throw that out there to get a little bit more information, but also to really just, put it on the table. We do need to have this publicly. We need to put it out there that we are looking for creative ideas for partnerships, and that there might be opportunity for these sooner than later. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
If I can add, one thing we've learned is conditions change all the time, and different things motivate different partners and developers. Sometimes tax credit's the big thing. In other market conditions, not so much. What they want is profit. As Bill says, we're going to open this up and find out what the developers want to do.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think that's all. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thanks,
the
guys.
information.
Thank you. Thanks.
And we can adjourn our work session. We're back tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We thank you so much, Grassroots. And if you got any questions, comments, suggestions, citizen petitions, tomorrow at 5 p.m. here in City Hall. Thank you.